Hey there guys, DRAGNOA.SHADOW here from Legion Pair, and today we've got a special deck profile to showcase for you guys. As Mirrorcard Neko here actually made top 8 at the Golden Phoenix Games event that just happened this past weekend. She went in with Nightmare Dolls thinking, oh, it's not going to be that good.
No, listen. First of all, I'm going to say this. I did very bad in the standard tournament.
Me too. Listen, I did bad in both tournaments.
I did so bad. I only won 2 out of the seven rounds, and I was just like, if standard is this bad, premium's got to be worse. So I was even debating, like, should I even go play? And although it was like, go play.
Yeah.
And just do it. You're fine. I'm like, but there's loop decks. No. You're fine.
You're fine.
So I ended up being fine, and technically, I got second place.
Only missing out to the undefeated person who was, yeah. I believe he was playing Blade Master.
Yeah, he was playing Blade Master, and I actually faced him. He was my only loss, which is why I had second place.
Yeah.
And then one person said play it out, and
okay, to be fair, that was Andrew. You knew he was going to do it.
Listen. Andrew's a nice guy, so I'm not mad at him for saying play it out. But everyone, since I topped with Nightmare Dolls, everyone's been asking, okay, what is your deck list? So I'm going to show that to you. But enough of the, I'm sure you're all like, enough with the boring stuff, get on to the good part. This is my G zone. I'll go over that after I go over my deck because it'll be easier to explain combo pieces and combo plays after I go over all the cards I have in my deck. So I'll move that to the side right here. Alright, my starter. I admit I kind of feel bad having this starter because it threw a lot of people off. They all thought I was playing Harry once they saw this starter. But then once I flipped over, like... So once my opponent saw, let's just say, one of these units. Turn it around so that you can see in the camera. They were like, oh crap, this isn't Harry. What is this? They're like, this can't be Nightmare Doll. She wouldn't play Nightmare Doll. And I'm just thinking to myself, oh yes, I'm gonna play Nightmare Doll. And I'm gonna enjoy every second of it. But yeah, I just chose this starter because at first I tried to run the Forerunner starter that was a Nightmare Doll, but I found I wasn't drawing enough from it. And to get my pieces more consistently, I needed a V-Series starter. And not only that, but between the Silverthorn one and this one, I thought this one was cuter. Not because I wanted to throw people off and to have people think I was playing Harry, but just because I find her a little cuter than the Silverthorn one. So I'll leave her like this.
Yep.
And then next, I'll go over my triggers first. I mean, do I really need to say anything? What?
Kind of, because...
I mean, like, seriously, do I need to even say why you need an over-trigger in the deck? I know a lot of people were asking me why not the basic Vanilla K one, but honestly, you drive check this very early game, that is a lot of pressure you're throwing on your opponent. Especially with my deck, where I get multiple Vanguard swings, so multiple crit pressures. It makes all the difference sometimes, and it just pressures my enemies so much that they're just like, even if they pass the million power, they still have to worry about next turn, oh, she's gonna keep swinging with crit. Alright. One lowly front for now. Let me find the other fronts. That one was a 4 of, and I used one of the other front triggers as a 1 of, but then once these came out, my full 4 playset of this one came out for Dark States. I was like, yeah, no, this one's got to be dropped down to a 1 of, and I got to put this in. Not only, it's mostly because of the shield value, I'm not going to lie about that. And also, I prefer to run more fronts than crits, because you'll see here, I'm only running 2 crit of the Ditch for Strife fodder. That's what I like to call her.
Yeah.
Because I find the fronts more useful in situations than crits. I mean, crits are good for proccing off pressure, which is why I'm using the silver trigger. But what I find is my opponent pulls one defensive. Only the thing that procced off the crit is going to hit. But now if I pull multiple front triggers, that's more attacks my opponent has to guard from. And not just, okay, just that big boy and that's it. That's why I run fronts. I know a lot of people are like, but the crits are pressure, all of that. And that's why I do run her as a 2-of. And she's just really good stride fodder as well. But I'm all about the fronts. I'm all about giving as many units as much power as possible, because if they hit the trigger and you're in a situation where you can't even swing at them anymore because like you don't have enough power in those multiple columns, then it's kind of like, what's the point? The next one for the trigger list are my draw PGs. Well, for obvious reasons, I wanted the draw power. There wasn't really, when I was deck building, there wasn't any grade 1 Sentinels from Premium that I was like, oh, that could be useful in this situation. So, but I figured with the deck that turbos as it is, I need as many pieces as I can in hand. And plus, getting that extra draw to have the ditch later on for this skill is always good to have, at least for me. And then my last one is the heal trigger, which again I chose her because she's the best looking heal trigger. I'm not gonna lie about that. And triggers for me, I know there are Nightmare Doll triggers out there that you can technically proc off, but one, they don't have the power that the others do. Like this is a 20k shield by itself if I can't for some reason G-guard regularly. And then the fronts are obviously more power, the crits are more power, and have better shield value, which is why I tend to run the V-Series stuff, or D-Series. Okay, first, we'll go over grade 1s. I run her as a 2-of. Now this was a card where I was bouncing back and forth of, is she really going to be helpful to me? Is she really going to be useful for me? Her skill, if I go a little closer, it's an auto skill from Soul. It is when your Workroid is placed on Vanguard, call this card to rear. This ability may only be used by the card with the same name once a turn. So what's good about this one, I can chuck it into the Soul as early as grade 1. And then anytime I ride my Vanguard, you'll see in my deck I run only Workroids, that's it. And she can just be called out and procced out. Yes, and the only reason she's a 2-of is because it's once per turn. So just to have that extra attack and just be like, oh, well, I can call this out for Soul for free and put it on this Excel circle. Because you're going to find later on, once I get to my grade 3s, they proc out a lot of Excel circles. So as many attacks as you can get as possible is good. Plus they're pretty good boosters too. The general 8k, the general shield value is always nice.
Like you're always gonna hit magic numbers on the 13 because of the Excel.
Yeah.
So even if you go against a force deck, it doesn't really matter that much.
My next one is Nightmare Doll Edith. Now at first when I was testing this deck, I didn't originally have her in, but I found, well, let me read you her skill first. When placed, this unit gets plus 2,000 until end of turn for each other Workroid on your Vanguard and Rearguard. Which I know doesn't seem like a lot, but the power adds up quickly. Especially when you got 3 to 4 Excel markers plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spots of Workroids, and that's all I run. Already I can easily proc off 12 to 14k with this card, on top of its basic 8k. Again, this is another one I run as a 2-of because it is on place. But it can be on place from Soul, from hand, anywhere. But running a 4-of is not always the best thing for this. I rather the 2 mega attacks I can leave in Soul, and then once I call things out of Soul, she procs off her power. Okay, my next grade 1. This one's a 4-of. This is Nightmare Doll Beverly. Now she's fantastic, because I'm going to read this skill off too. When your other Workroid is placed in the same column as this unit, that unit gets plus 5,000 power at the end of turn. Meaning, let's say right here, this is one column. Call. Plus 5. So that's already a 14, 21 power column. And now imagine a grade 3 on top of that, a grade 2 on top of that. It does have to be Workroid, which again, I only run Workroids in my main deck. So it's never a problem of proccing off the power. Plus with the 13k there, I'm guaranteed to be at least 23 or 24, meaning that if I face a force deck and they hit a trigger, I'm still guaranteed to pass the attack. And this is just a really, also it's a really good booster for Vanguard, I almost forgot to mention. Because when it doesn't matter if it, even if it's rested, it'll still give the Vanguard +5 every time I ride over a new Vanguard. Which is just another way to help proc off power. Next is my last grade 1 in the deck, and another 4 of her. She came from the most recent set for V-Series. And this is Nightmare Doll Abigail. Her skill is when placed on Van Soul Charge 1, which, I mean, I'll show you, when I get to my G-Zone, I'll explain why the Soul Charge 1 isn't too bad, regardless of what I Soul Charge. But for right now, her second skill is the more important one. And it's at the end of the turn, you can retire this unit and return a grade 3 Workroid from your soul to hand. And if your Vanguard is a Workroid, you countercharge 1. Meaning, again, I'm always going to be on Workroid Vanguard, so no matter what, I can always proc off her skill. Now, there is another thing. I didn't get to play against any Chaos during this tournament, but if they're flipped over, there's a ruling where if they're locked and they get flipped up, you can still, since it's technically still the end of your turn, the countercharge can still go off.
Before Chaos Breaker's skill can go off.
So
you can purposely activate.
So you could purposely deny them from getting the extra Excel markers, but that's assuming you have all 4. But like anytime, also being able to return grade 3s from soul to hand is useful if you want to keep the ride pressure on, or if I want to try to go into like an ultimate attack turn the next one. Again, just another really, really useful card. Right. Next up is my grade 2s. Now, I'll admit, my grade 2s were ones I was struggling with for a bit. Because I really didn't know how I wanted to combo this at all. I knew at the beginning she was a must. She was also the one that came from the newest set for there. And she is Nightmare Doll Marissa. And she is an obvious 4-up. Like, this, you need this as a 4-up. Because her skill is when this unit is placed from hand, you put a card from your hand into the soul, and then you look at the top 7 cards of your deck, and you reveal up to 2 non-grade 2 Workroid normal units from among them, and put them into your hand and shuffle your deck. But this essentially, since my deck is a full Workroid deck, this essentially guarantees me at least my grade 1 or grade 3s that I need. And which 9 times out of 10, I'm able to proc off 2 cards. There's only been like 1 instance I've never gotten a card from this. Like 1 instance. And I understand why they have that ruling for non-grade 2s, because honestly, you see her on top 7, you could just keep looping this 4 times over. And that would make this actually more busted than it already is. And plus the extra 2 cards in hand, you could do grade 3s for ride fodder, you could do grade 1s for shield value.
Basically, you go +1 in card advantage.
Well, +2. Well, yeah, +1, but yeah. And she can only be called from hand, too. So if you end up soul charging her or anything like that, she becomes basically a vanilla card. But I knew she was a must when I was building this deck. I also knew this was a must. And this is the only technical premium card I run in the main deck. The only technical one. Because her skill is just that good. Because I didn't know how many of you were thinking. Yeah, she. At first I ran her as a 3-up, but I wasn't seeing her that often. So I told DRAGNOA, I was like, I need to get another one of her. 3 is not enough.
Yeah.
And 4 has been fantastic. So I'll read you her skill. It's a little complicated. Her axe skill is put this unit into your soul, choose up to 1 Workroid from your soul, and call it to rear. And until the end of turn, that unit gets the auto ability of when this unit is put into your soul from your rear, you choose a card named Nightmare Doll Master Brenda from your soul and call it to rear. Okay. So basically, it combos very well with other cards. like, let's say I chuck this into Soul, and I had an Alice out. I could just call Alice out to rear and be like, okay, once that goes back into Soul, I just call out another Brenda. It can only be done once a turn, as the other text says on the bottom. Auto, when this unit is placed on rear from Soul, choose all the unit's axe skills and they are lost until the end of turn.
So it's basically a hard once per turn on it?
Yeah, it is a very hard once per turn, but you can still get out as many things from Soul as possible if you have all of them on board. But you can only call out one back out from Soul.
Yeah.
And that's why she was a must. And then the other card I had been debating on for a while was Jumping Jill. Not the original Jill, the V-Series Jill, but I found she wasn't working. Yes, I could call out a card from Soul, but what I found worked better to help me get draw and power was this one. She's a 3-of. Her name is Nightmare Doll Ellen. And her skill is when it attacks, Counterblast 1, you put another worker right on your rear to Soul, draw a card, and this unit gets plus 10,000 power. So again, one of my plays I would be doing is, like, let's say I had her on my grade 2 circle, and then her here, and let's just say this grade 1 here. So basically what I was doing, swing at Van. Oh, you hit a trigger. Okay. Swing, move into Soul, draw a card, plus 10. Not only can this proc out later in the game when I really need it, but she also gave me a plus 10 and more hand advantage. Meaning my opponent was like, well, that trigger didn't matter, guess I got a guard. Okay. Next up are my grade 3s. We'll start with the one everyone thinks when they hear Nightmare Doll, is Alice. Now I only run her as a 2-of, and I'll read her skill and then I'll explain why. When placed on ban, you may call up to one work rate from your Soul to rear, and that unit gets plus 5 until the end of turn. That's pretty good if I'm stuck riding Alice first. At least I could proc out another work rate to come out. But she's not the ideal ride. She's the ideal rear guard, and it's because of this skill. At the end of the battle that it attacks, you counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1, you put this unit into your Soul, and you call out a non-grade 3 card from your Soul to rear. So, I mean, essentially this card is good in almost any Pale Moon build in general because she's not limited to just work ride. But what's so good about her is that I can proc off another attack with her. And the reason I only run 2 is because she is a little high cost, because the Counterblast and the Soul Blast can hurt if you're not paying attention to resource management, which is why I only run her as a 2-of. And I've never needed to run her as more than that. I think I tried running her as a 3 or 4-of at one point, and I just found that I was wasting too many resources trying to proc out more attacks. So she's good as a 2-of, that's all I've ever needed, and she gets the job done when I need her to. So let's go here. And now I call this the star of the deck because this deck would not function without her at all. She was released during that set that Silverthorn was like the main deck.
The Phantom Steve Restoration?
Yeah.
I think it was called?
Yeah, that's what it was called. And this card was when I knew, okay, Nightmare Dolls could be broken and stupid if you could play your cards right. So this is Nightmare Doll Carol. This is what makes the deck what it is. This is the key piece. This is your vanguard for this deck. Without Carol, none of your extra attacks can proc off. None of your skills will be as powerful. This deck needs Carol. 100%. You cannot run this without Carol. And then I'll just explain her skill as to why. The auto skill on Van is not the one that we're mainly focusing on for this, but it's also a good way to call out more units. For auto on Vanguard, when placed, you look at the top 5 cards of your deck and you put one among them into your Soul, and then shuffle your deck. And if you put a grade 3 Workoroid into that Soul from the top 5, you may call it to rear. So already she's proccing out an extra attack for you for basically for free. If not, you get a free soul charge as to whatever it is you want to put in. But it's her second skill, which is the most important one and what makes this deck. And that is, when your grade 3 rear guard is put into your soul, you counterblast 1, and you discard 2 cards from hand, and you ride a Workroid from your soul as stand. But that Workroid does get a -1 drive until end of turn. Now, that's any Workroid. And if you have your counterblasts correct, and you have a Carol in soul, ride Carol again. Ride Carol again. Ride Carol again. If the conditions are set. You can just keep looping her, because she's not a once per turn skill. So you can keep looping her for as long as you want to. Or as long as your resources allow you to, whichever comes first. And that's why she's the main piece of this deck. Without her, there is no rewriting. There is no combo plays. You need her. Anyone who's building a Nightmare Doll deck needs this card. 100%. Like, the deck does not function without her. But there's also another key piece that goes with Carol. And this one was also a card that was released for that set that came out for V-Series recently. And this is, I'm going to put Carol like this. Her name is Nightmare Doll Chelsea. I also run her as a 4-of. Turning my cards upside down. I'm not used to filming like this, so I apologize, guys. Bear with me. Now, she is also a must 4-of for her skill and for the fact that she can help me proc off Carol without as much cost. So I'll read her skill, and I'll explain in conjunction of why that's good. So her first auto skill on Vanguard, well, we'll talk about the rear guard skill too first, which is the second text on this card. That's at the end of the battle of your attack, if your Vanguard is a Workroid, which with my build, it's always going to be a Workroid. You put this unit into your soul, and you get to choose one of your opponent's units, rear guards, and move that into soul. So now what I've done to people is anyone who's called out Honolly to just be like, oh, okay, you can't attack any more than 5 times. Nope. Move into soul, you move that into soul. And basically, the Honolly play becomes useless with just this card, which is why I like it. For Honolly, also, there's a card in Chaos where it's like, every time it hits, you get to,
check top 5. So
yeah.
basically, Craving Call, you can
move
chuck that in.
Move that into soul, move that into soul. The only time I wouldn't be able to do that with this card is if my opponent says you can't choose by, it can't be retired by opponent's effects.
Either that or you're on a certain stride that isn't a Workroid.
Yeah, no. Unfortunately, my strides are not all Workroid. So this combo play relies more on me being on a Workroid, which I'll get into in a little bit. But again, the play is supposed to be, you chuck it into soul with Carol being on Vanguard, and then you proc off Carol's skill, counterblast 1, ditch 2 cards in hand. And again, if you have another Carol in soul, you just rewrite Carol. And then once you find you're about down to 2 counterblast, you once you put another grade 3 into soul. And also what's good about her, you can chuck her into soul for free cost. She doesn't cost anything to move her in. Even if the attack doesn't hit, it doesn't matter. You can chuck her right in and get the skill off. And then you rewrite her as the Vanguard on your last, when you only have 2 more counterblasts left. So that way you can proc off her second skill on Vanguard, which is at the end of the battle this unit attacked, you counterblast 1 and you get to call 2 Workroids from your soul to rear. And if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, those unit gets +10. So now, even if I had more Chelsea in soul, I could just call out 2 of them, be like +10, chuck more things into your soul. Like, I've devastated boards because of this card. Like, devastated. Like, I had a Bermuda Triangle player I was playing against, and he had the Pearl Sisters up at 28k. Normally that wasn't gonna hit. I was just like, chuck into soul, put that into soul. And it's just destroying when I can get this attack up multiple times. Like, it can destroy boards and which that's why I love her. And also proc me out 2 extra attacks. So if you haven't already figured out, this deck is basically, you have to multi-attack with it. It is a rush deck, but knowing which decks you need to rush against and which decks not to rush against is an important factor, and that comes with experience. Alright, so now that I'm done explaining that, I'll go to the G zone. Okay, first to flip this one over. Seabreeze, I know I've had people laugh at me for running this card still. And I get why. It's not as useful as it used to be from what I've heard. But for me, when I'm in a situation where people are like, oh crap, it's the Workroid build. Well, I'm just not gonna ride up grade 2. I'm not gonna give her first stride. Just to be like, oh, I have Seabreeze in the deck, so that's kind of invalid. Counterblast 2, get first stride anyway.
And then you can proc
and
off
and then get the triple drive off. It's just, it helps getting more cards in hand. It helps stop my opponent from like being able to make bigger plays because they'll be wasting cards from hand to guard. It's still a good card. I know it's not for every build anymore, but it's still good for what it does. All right, I'll move that right there. Next up is the other piece that's the bread and butter of this build, and that is Nightmare Doll Beatrix. So basically, anytime you ride into this, you have to have her on Vanguard. That's the only way you're going to be able to proc up as many attacks as possible. So when you have to stride over her, essentially, you have to stride over Carol if you want the full effects and the full big turn to go off. So I'll read Beatrice's skill. Okay, so this card's ability, auto on Van, is choose 3 of your Workroids on your rear guard and put them into your soul. At the end of the battle, this unit attacked a Vanguard. If you have a hard card with Nightmare Doll in its card name, you may pay the cost. If you do, put this unit into your G zone face up, choose 2 Workroids from your soul and call them to separate rears. Not only is this proccing you more attacks, but essentially she de-strides for the turn. Carol is rested, but Carol's skill is now active if I put a grade 3 into soul, which allows me to do the shenanigans of
the Chelseas,
of the Alice, and then just pay the cost, restand with something else in the soul. So again, these 2 pieces are the main bread and butter of this deck. The bread and butter. This deck does not function without these cards. And this is the main stride that helps me proc all of that off. But this stride is only good when I'm ready for the big turn. Like, if my opponent damages me to 5 damage with all open counterblast, this is the play to go. And I have to have Carol on Van. If I don't have Carol on Van, I'm kind of screwed and I have to ride a different stride. But with Carol on Vanguard, the bread and butter. This deck would not be what it is without these 2 pieces.
This is a very high risk, high reward kind of play, but if you get it off, considering the amount of fronts, the possibility of hitting your over trigger, that's the main reason why she's running the Dark States over trigger over the vanilla.
Because of how many times I stand the Vanguard because of these cards. And that is, I've gone games where I've swung with Vanguard at least 4 times. Like once with her, and then up to 3 times from the normal.
Yeah.
And just imagine the crit pressure on top of that, plus if I pull the crit really early game.
Yeah.
That's insane. And I'm saying that as, like, I'm just thinking about how insane that must be and how scary that must have been for everybody facing it. So my next stride is I kind of use this stride as kind of fodder in the deck for to pay costs and stuff sometimes, but she is helpful for those random occasions of what if I don't get Carol and they're not giving me a lot of counterblast to work with. This can help me get Carol back from death if I'm lucky enough to pull it off that. I only run her as a 2-of because there's honestly no need to run her as more than that, because she's kind of just not a very good card outside of helping me get Carol out. So I'll read out her skill. act once per turn. Choose a face down Workroid from your G zone and turn it face up. Choose a card from your hand and put it into your soul. You look at 10 cards from the top of your deck and search up to one grade 3 Workroid from among them and reveal it. Put it on your Vanguard as a hard card or into your soul and shuffle the deck. If you put it on your Vanguard as your hard card, you put all of your other hard cards into the drop zone. Meaning that if I'm in a situation where I had to ride Alice and it's my first stride turn, and obviously being on Alice does not help me proc out a lot of attacks that I could be doing. This helps me search the top 10 and helps me get Carol and essentially has me put Carol on Vanguard. Alright, my next stride. Now, I'll give Noah more credit for this because at first I was playing this deck without these two cards. Well, these two Stride Potter cards. And I was like, but they're not Nightmare Dolls, how they're gonna work for my deck? And he's like, well, because of this skill, and this skill is why they'll work. So he's like, I'll pay for the cards, just try them out.
Yeah, so, pretty much.
So I said, okay, I'll give them a try for you. So now, these you mostly see in Harry. These two, well, I run her as a 2 of, and I run this combo piece as a 3 of. So in order to, let me explain this one first. Fancy Megatrick Dark Lord Princess. At the end of the battle, it attacks a Vanguard. Turn a card from your G zone face up. Stride a face up G with power and Magnalia ability from your G zone on your Magia ability from your G zone as your Vanguard as stand. That unit gets -2 drive until end of the charge. If you stride, you can call this card to rear. So basically, you pay pretty much no cost to use this. No, you turn a card from your G zone face up. So essentially, you just turn her face up, and then because she's face up in the G zone, you just get to stride over. I'll just use Carol as an example, because Carol's been my go-to for everything. So basically, I turn her over as a G unit, and then I just stride on top of this, and call this as a rear guard. And it's just there to be another rear guard attack. And then her skill also helps a lot too. Where this one is, when it attacks, you put a card from your hand into your soul, and you turn a G zone unit face up. And then you get an imaginary gift XL, and you call a card from your soul to additional rear, and that unit gets +15 until the end of that turn. And then the called unit, it gets put back into soul.
At the end of the turn.
At the end of the turn. So I know you're looking at this and you're like, again, this is Harry support. Why would you use this in Workroid? But what I found most of all helpful with these two, and again, it doesn't help me proc off as many attacks as the others do, but because it helps me get essentially 4 drive checks and a free unit from Soul. My main play that I like to do, just go into my main deck for a sec, is if I can help it, if I've got an Alice in Soul, this is where Alice comes in. From Yvette's skill, I call out Alice to rear, gets +15. I got an open Counterblast, Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1, proc off another attack.
More ideally, you can just do Chelsea and still have that same kind of
No,
play.
Chelsea,
that's
they're
right.
not Workroids, so
Right.
Chelsea's skill doesn't go off. That's why you do have to be careful with this. I use this stride combo when my opponent's trying to damage deny me. Alright, so now it's the time for the G guards. I'll admit, I only have 3 in here right now.
Wait, what?
Because usually there's not a lot of situations where the G guards come up, because sometimes it's better just to guard with the heal trigger. Unfortunately, like, I didn't get another one of him in time, so I had to settle for him, but I never used him at all. Because his skill is a little harder to proc off than their skills. I'll move Carol back out of the way.
Oh my god.
Because this one's skill, the only one I ran as a 1 of, is choose a face down G Guardian from your G zone and turn it face up. When this unit is placed on G, if there are cards of 4 or more different grades in your soul, you may pay the cost. If you do, this unit gets +15 shield until the end of battle. What's bad about this card is having to sacrifice another G guard in order to get the skill off. And for something that's kind of hard to do with my build, which is have 1 of every grade in soul, I mean, it's not impossible. It can happen. But when I'm only running 3 G-guards right now and I have to waste 1 just to proc off the skill, it's not something I prefer to do. As soon as I get another one of him, I'm gonna add him to the deck.
Like, honestly, I think that this G-guard is the only one you realistically need in your deck.
Yes, so this G-guard is the more important one, and the one that helps me get past auto abilities that keep me from calling out my Sentinels and other guard restrict. Because this one's skill is, when this unit is placed on G-Guardian, I soul charge 1, and then I choose a card from my soul and call it to G-Guardian. So now let's say I'm in a...
Yeah.
So let's say I'm in a situation where... where did I put my...
You put it over here.
Oh no, right here.
Oh.
Okay, let's say I have a situation where, for some reason, I can't use Sentinel Block. If this is in Soul, I don't... And well, Sentinel Block, that doesn't allow me to call from hand. I just call this from Soul, I pay the cost, and my opponent can't hit me. That skill doesn't work. I wish I had known that I could get away with this when I was facing my top 8 opponent, Andrew, because he did the Zeroth Dragon into the card that wouldn't let me call grade 0s to rear. So if all of you are screaming at me in tournament as to why I didn't chuck my perfect guard into the soul to proc this off to pay the cost to make the attack not hit, that's why. I didn't know I could do it. And now I know. And I'm going to do it to him next time if he tries to play that on me again. Because I will have at least 1 perfect guard I can shove into soul by the time he reaches that turn. And something to discard it with. And I will make sure I have a heal in hand too. So, Andrew, if you're watching this, that play's not going to work 3rd time against me. I've learned. And my last one, my piece de resistance to this deck in my G-Guardian. Dust. Dramatic music for effect.
I'll try to edit it.
Okay. Alright, so Dust. He is a fantastic kill condition. Especially when you're facing against players like Luard, Chaos, anything like that can either make you guard with more cards from hand than necessary. I say he's the best to use when your opponent's either at 4 or 5 damage. Because I'll read why his skill is good. Okay. His thing, you have to stride the same card face up. Like if you're on a Carol, you gotta ditch a Carol. Which with my deck, it's very easy to draw into the piece I need to ultimate stride. Which also is another reason why I forgot to mention, why I run this combo. This combo allows me to get to G Generation Break 3, which allows me to proc him off essentially on my 2nd stride turn, if I choose to do so. And that's why this is kind of disgusting, that combo play. Okay, so let me read his skill. Counterblast 2, when this unit is placed on ban, you may pay the cost. If you do, until end of turn, your opponent's vanguards and rear guards lose all their abilities and their grade and power increase or decrease to 1. Not like 10,000, not like 1,000, 1. 1 single lily point. Basically, I put my opponent to a level that Focus Sash procs off, if we're speaking Pokemon terms.
No, not even. You're like on like death's door pretty much. Like that. This is like an even better delete basically.
Yeah, and then also the other skill is if the number of your cards in your opponent's damage zone is 4 or less, choose one of your opponent's vanguards and deal them 1 damage. So basically, if my opponent's at 4, that's a free damage. The only downside to that is if they proc off a trigger, the trigger effects still go off.
Yeah.
And you have to make sure you have Counterblast 2 by the time you use him. But I have destroyed people because this blocks G-Guardians. This makes people have to guard with at least 2 cards from hand. He's a 25,000 base power on top of the Vanguard, which is...
So that hits 37, basically.
Yeah, meaning they gotta guard a lot from hand or perfect guard in order to survive the Zeroth turn.
Yeah.
And it's just, like, even... I know people say Zeroth is situational, but honestly, in games when I know I can get the confirmed kill, this is the way to go about it.
But yeah, one last thing before we head off. This is the playmat that she earned in top 8. It's ironic because I went into the tournament with Valkerion, but I ended up selling it at the event because I came to terms with the fact I can't play loop decks for anything. And are you still gonna get this thing framed or no?
I would like to. Honestly, this is the first main event well, maybe a local main event, but still a main event regardless, that I've ever topped in. And the first playmat I've ever received from that. So I think I would like to make it special. Maybe I will frame it at some point.
But yeah, this video has gone on long enough. Till next time, this is DRAGNOA.SHADOW.
And Mirrorcard Neko.
And we'll see you guys next time. Bye everyone.
Bye everybody.